Shane, thanks for joining us this morning on CBS Sports Radio.
Hey, no problem.
Hey, everybody we talked to said there is no way Jimmy Walker, who was leading after 1 and 2 rounds, there's no way he's going to be around on Sunday. How was he around on Sunday?
Well, I mean, this is a guy that struggled with putting all season long. I mean, if you go look at his stats, it's been a long time since he even had a top 10, much less really contended in an event. But, I mean, he just got the ball in the hole. I mean, he seemed comfortable on the greens. I think the delay actually helped him a little bit. I think it not feeling as normal as maybe it would normally in a major. Guys that have been there before. You know, he just leaned on a putter that's been balky all season long. And, I mean, when you look at Jimmy Walker's career, especially the last 2 or 3 years, you know, he's won a lot. I mean, he's not a guy that's uncomfortable in that position, in that situation. But, you know, this year it's probably been one of his worst years, really, in the last 4 or 5 years. So I think it was just him feeling comfortable in the greens and really, like I said, getting the benefit of kind of a weird draw and a weird weather week.
And, you know, it's interesting, Shane, not a lot of people will think about Jimmy Walker as a elite PGA golfer. And you're right. He's won a lot. It took him until about 2014 until he found his stride, which was a breakout year for him. But they don't see him as this elite golfer. But golf is interesting in that way because you don't have to be to win a major. What happens going forward with Jimmy Walker? Is this a propeller that pushes him even farther up the path, the really hard-fought path that he's walked? Or is this a blip in the sun?
You know, I'm not sure about, you know, Jimmy Walker in particular. I mean, I think that, you know, I've said this for a while now. This is going to be the generation of one-time major winners. I mean, if you look even at the season, I mean, everybody this season is a first-time major winner. But, you know, you think about Jason Duffner and Keegan Bradley and names like that, Webb Simpson. I mean, this is going to be the generation of these types of players because the talent pool is so deep right now in golf. I mean, we wanted to talk ourselves into a quote-unquote big three, you know, with Rory and Jordan Spieth and Jason Day, who, of course, almost one just finished a shot back. But, you know, this season it really reminded us that there's a ton of golfers out there that are not only capable of contending but are capable of winning these big tournaments. And I thought it was interesting to see, you know, after the last 2 seasons we had where we had Rory win 2 in a row and Jordan win 2 in a row and then Jason Day get the PGA last year, I think it was a friendly reminder that there's 50, 60, 70 guys out there that could win a major in any given week, and Jimmy Walker showed us that this week at the PGA.
We're talking to Shane Bacon, Fox Sports golf writer. Shane, tell me why it was beneficial to Jimmy Walker to not get regrouped with Jason Day, because it felt like that was a huge advantage for him because he didn't have to deal with the crowd.
Yeah, I mean, and it's not just as much the crowd, I think, but, you know, it's about playing with the guy that bombs it off the tee, that is, you know, the number 1 player in the world, that has won a whole bunch of tournaments this year. That's the defending champion of the PGA Championship. I think a lot of that plays into it because, you know, when you're playing with somebody that's not to that caliber, that doesn't bring that intimidation factor to it, I think it's a little more comfortable to play in that setting. And if you get in there with Jason Day and he makes a birdie or he rolls in a couple of putts like he did, you know, in the middle of his round, you know, now you start thinking maybe this guy is going to catch me. And I think the fact that you can look ahead and see what's happening and then play to what you need to do was very helpful for him. And, I mean, you know, the PGA did the right thing. I mean, they couldn't have redrawn if they wanted to finish this thing on Sunday. But I think Jimmy Walker will look back at some point and say, thank goodness that's the way it went because it really did help him out a lot.
Yeah, I also heard about the lift in place, and that have a real effect on because the conditions were so bad and so muddy. I mean, there was no roll. You hit these massive drives as we're used to seeing, and it goes out 330 yards, and then it rolls another. That didn't happen. It hit and stick. Did the lift in place have anything to do with how these guys played on Sunday?
I don't think so. I mean, you know, they're all getting to do it, you know. So, I mean, everybody's able to, you know, pick up the ball. And we saw a couple of drives that almost plugged or did plug immediately in the fairway. So when you see those types of things, you understand the decision. I think it was the right call. I mean, you couldn't have had these guys out there playing in those types of conditions because it was so wet in those fairways. And some fairways worse than others. I mean, you'd see golf shots where guys would be standing, you know, 5, 6 feet from puddles that were still in the fairway. So I think it was the right call. You know, I mean, it's always going to help guys that are leading because they don't have the issue of hitting it in a divot or having a mud ball that goes, you know, 20 yards right of where they're thinking it's going to go because it takes a weird, you know, it takes a weird kind of spin off the club face. So I think it benefits the leaders, but I don't think looking back we're going to say, you know, Jimmy Walker won this with some sort of an asterisk or anything. I mean, I think everybody got the same kind of conditions.
Shane Bacon here, Fox Sports golf writer. Chatting with us on Tiki and Tierney. You talk about Rory McIlroy, 2014. He was the darling. He won the Open Championship and the PGA and back-to-back majors, and it felt like, wow, we're losing Tiger, but, man, we're gaining some stars. What's wrong with Rory? It feels like his game is off. He's scrambling. I mean, he had to make eagle in round 2 just to try to get to the tournament the second day. And just it seems like whatever he's been doing has not worked really for the last couple of months.
Well, I mean, it's just his putting. I mean, I think he was number 1 in strokes gained tee to green in the entire field, and he misses the cut. And he said it after. He said, anybody else that was hitting the ball like I was hitting it for 2 days would not only have made the cut, but would be, in the top 5 or possibly leading this golf tournament. And his putting was just horrific this week. I mean, before this week, in the 15 events he's played in 2016, he's finished in the top 6 9 times. So, I mean, he's had a good year in the sense of contending and getting into events. It's just he hasn't been winning like we've seen in past seasons. It's going to take some time for him to maybe get away from the game a little bit, go work on some putting, maybe try some different putters. I saw a lot of kind of club experts and stuff say maybe go to a heavier putter that seems like the head's moving a little bit when he's putting. But you're going to go through these kind of ebbs and flows, and when your downtime, it still includes 9 of 16 top 6s. I mean that's why we think Rory is so good, because he's still able to get himself in position even when he doesn't have his best stuff. And I just think it was kind of an off week and really kind of an off year in the majors for Rory, and I don't see anything long term an issue at all. I just think again, he didn't have his best stuff those 4 weeks that really matter for kind of the sports public.
Yeah, same thing can be said for Jordan Spieth. I mean, because it felt like he was going to make a run. It didn't ultimately happen, but whatever is ailing his swing is probably not long term.
Yeah, and again, I mean, this is the guy that really, you do it to yourself in a sense. I mean, he wins 2 majors last year, and we're all sitting there going, now we've got this wonder child over here in America that can contend with the Rorys and the Jason Days and the Dustin Johnsons and all that stuff. And I mean, he should have won the Masters. I mean, I think we can all agree on that. A couple of bad swings there, he still almost did it, and he has 2 other wins this year. So to me, I always look at the down years for these players and see what they were still able to accomplish. Jordan Spieth, not his best season. I think he would agree on that. Yet he's still been able to capture 2 titles and should have won a second Masters. So, yeah, I mean, again, I thought he was going to make a run this weekend, too. I really thought that it was setting up really well for him because he could kind of throw those darts in there and rely on the putter. But the putter's just not been the same as it was last year, and it's hard to replicate stuff like that. I mean, you finish in the top 4 in all 4 majors. It's hard to come back and do that again in another season after.
I'm talking to Fox Sports golf writer Shane Bacon. I'm interested in your take on this, because I think we mentioned it, we alluded to it with Rory and Jordan Spieth creating these ridiculous expectations for where golf, as a whole is going. And then you get a year where all the majors, where the casual golfers will dive into the majors, not much of the rest of the PGA Tour. And you see Danny Willett, you see Dustin Johnson. That's a different story because I think we were all expecting him to just finally win one, and he did at the U.S. Open. Then Henrik Stenson, first-time winner, and then Jimmy Walker, first-time winner. Is this good for golf? The parity, I guess, is the word you'd use?
Well, I think it's good for golf because these aren't just, this isn't 03. I mean, this isn't the complete randomness of these players. Danny Willett was a top 10 player when he won the Masters. And in Europe, I mean, he's considered one of the best players really on the European tour. Of course, Dustin Johnson is extremely talented and probably should have already had a major, before he got through Oakmont. And Henrik Stenson, I mean, Stenson is one of the best ball strikers in the game and has been for the last 8-9 years. And I think it was one of those things. He was on a short list of best player without a major. And I think that the day he won it, it wasn't a big surprise. Really, of all the surprises, Jimmy Walker is probably the longest shot. And again, as you mentioned, a guy that has now 6 PGA Tour wins. I mean, he's a good, solid player. He's not Sean McKeel or he's not Rich Beam. I mean, these aren't guys that we'll never really hear from again, in a sense. And so I do think it's good for golf because these are guys that can win another major, that could win 2 or 3 majors in their career, depending on how they play it throughout. So I kind of like it. But with that being said, I would love to see next year a couple of those big names you mentioned win another one, just to remind us that they're still there as well. Because, if Rory goes 2017 without a major, now we're talking over 3 years without him winning one. And I think the questions will get louder and louder for somebody like that.
What about the Ryder Cup? It's coming up now. Obviously, Jimmy Walker with this win moves way up the rankings. He's likely going to be participating in it. What do we think the Ryder Cup is going to look like for the U.S.?
Well, I hope, and I've said this for a while, I hope it looks different. That's my hope for a long time. I mean, you're talking about you're talking about a team that's been a little tired and so similar over the last decade. You know, you've had some older players in there that don't have a great record. I love the fact that somebody like Brooks Koepka could get in, and maybe Justin Thomas, Patrick Reed, Ricky Fowler, these faces that really get up for this. And that's my hope. I hope that Davis Love maybe takes a flyer or two on somebody that gets red hot over the next 2 or 3 or 4 weeks and puts in some different teams that are excited to play in this, because frankly, the formula has been working for the United States. We do get a golf course that a lot of these American players have had some success on in Hazeltine, but my hope is that we're not going with the same guys that have played in every Ryder Cup for the last decade or so. Because, I mean, if nothing else, shake it up a little bit and see what happens.
Yeah, is there a formula, or is it purely subjective sometimes,
I've talked to Paul Azinger, is part of our coverage. I've talked extensively with him a lot. Even on my podcast, I had a conversation with him about the Ryder Cup. And, I think there's a lot of themes and ideas that just have been disproved over the years. I think experience is something that we lean on a lot in golf, and it hasn't really ever worked out in the Ryder Cup. These guys have played 6, 7 Ryder Cups, and maybe the record is still abysmal. I mean, you throw somebody new in there. You throw Patrick Reed in there, who is a young player like he did, or Anthony Kim, who had some success back in the day, Jordan Spieth. You throw these young guys in here that are so jazzed up to do it. You pair them with people they like, with kind of matching personalities. That seems to be what's worked. That's why I think that you look at the European Ryder Cup and they have such success, because they really just find guys that love playing with each other, that have complementing golf games, and put them together and don't really mix it up. And I think that's something we've tinkered a little bit too much, I think. And I'd love to see them just go with what would make sense and see if these guys can go out and win.
Yeah, make the guys have fun. Shane Bacon, I appreciate you joining us this morning.
Anytime.